What if I told you that in some of the best games, your fiercest enemies could become your closest friends? Today, we're diving into the top 12 games where the lines between friend and foe get all blurry. From forging alliances with former enemies, to complex moral choices that make you question who's really on your side, these games will leave you thinking twice about who's a friend and who's a foe. These games do more than blur lines, they obliterate them, making every interaction a potential plot twist. So stick around as we break down these genre-defying masterpieces. Starting off at number 12, we've got Undertale, where enemies are literally just misunderstood friends. In Undertale, you can complete the entire game without killing a single enemy. You've got to talk, joke, and even flirt your way out of fights. Imagine strolling through a dark cave, face to face with a creature that looks like it could gobble you up in one bite. Instead of swinging a sword or casting a spell, you crack a joke. The monster chuckles and lets you pass. That's the magic of Undertale. It turns conflict resolution into an art form. There's something inherently charming about negotiating with monsters. I mean, who knew it could be more fun than fighting them? One moment you're flirting with a ghost who has social anxiety, and the next, you're comforting a spider over her financial troubles. It's like being in a never-ending episode of Monster Dr. Phil. From quirky monsters to complicated soldiers. Number 11 brings us Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, where enemies often become more than just obstacles. In this game, you've got the boss, your mentor, and final opponent. He's not just any enemy, he's your most trusted friend. Imagine going up against someone who taught you everything you know. It's like fighting your best friend at a family BBQ, but with a lot more emotional depth and explosions. The boss doesn't just throw punches. He throws philosophical dilemmas your way. Every encounter is a dance of wits and reflexes. I remember sneaking through the jungle, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, only to face him in that final showdown. You can't help but feel conflicted. This is someone who shaped you, molded you, and now stands against you. What really makes this fight memorable is the emotional gravity. The dialogue between Snake and the boss during their final battle is heart-wrenching. He challenges not just your skills, but your very beliefs about loyalty and duty. It's like being in the world's most intense therapy session, only with camouflage and CQC moves. And let's not forget those dramatic cutscenes. They pull at your heartstrings while simultaneously blowing stuff up. It's like watching an action-packed soap opera where everyone has a tragic backstory. Speaking of complex relationships, how about some monster hunting with a side of friendship?
Never known a monster to set a trap. Someone's here.
At number 10, we have The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, where the monsters aren't always the real enemies. I remember trekking through the rugged landscapes, my sword ready for anything that might jump out. But it wasn't just the beasts lurking in the shadows. Sometimes it was old rivals like Letho of Gulet. Imagine crossing paths with a guy who once tried to kill you. Awkward, right? But in this game, even your fiercest rivals can end up as your best allies, depending on your choices. There I was, face to face with Letho. We had history, not the good kind. But instead of drawing swords, we talked. Turns out, it's hard to stay enemies when you're both just trying to make it in this monster-infested world. One minute you're at each other's throats, and the next, you're swapping war stories over a campfire. The game throws you into these morally gray areas where the line between friend and foe is as blurry as a foggy Novigrad morning. One moment you're hunting a griffin together, and the next you're debating politics and past betrayals. The choices you make shape these relationships in ways that feel real and consequential. Now let's take a leap into space with some former foes turned friends.
Has to be on the roof, or the vegetation would overgrow it in a few hours.
Shepard, I am picking up thermal signatures everywhere, except at your
Coming in at number 9 is Mass Effect 2, where recruiting enemies to fight by your side is just another day at the office. Imagine flying through the galaxy, putting together a ragtag crew to take on a suicide mission. You've got hardened criminals, mercenaries, and psychotic biotics, all with questionable loyalty, but that's where the fun begins. Characters like Jack or Zaid might start out as wild cards, but with the right conversations, they become some of your most loyal allies. I remember meeting Jack for the first time. She's got more tattoos than skin and a temper that could fry a planet. At first, she wants to tear you apart, But after some heart-to-heart talks about her troubled past and a loyalty mission that involves blowing up her old prison, she starts to trust you. There's something deeply satisfying about turning someone who once hated your guts into a steadfast friend. And then there's Zaid, grumpy, old, and lethal. His introduction is a firefight in a dingy warehouse, and he's more interested in his payday than in helping you save the galaxy. But after helping him settle an old score and showing that you've got his back, he starts to respect you. It's like taming a wild beast with nothing but dialogue options and moral support. Who needs friendship bracelets when you've got loyalty missions? Each character's story adds layers to their personalities and makes every mission feel like more than just another shootout in space. Next up, let's go to school, where your students might become your enemies, or your best friends.
Right, princess?
Right. No matter the tactics you devise, we will destroy you. The best you can hope
At number 8, Fire Emblem. 3 Houses makes you rethink your alliances, because sometimes your students turn into enemies. Imagine walking through the grand halls of Garreg Monastery, where you're not just a professor, but also a tactician. You're training bright-eyed students who hang on your every word, and then bam! A few story arcs later, those same students are facing you on the battlefield. It's like grading papers, except with more swords and fireballs. Depending on your choices, characters you once trained might become your fiercest foes. But with the right actions, you can bring them back to your side. Picture this. One moment you're having tea with Dorothea, discussing her dreams of becoming a singer. The next, she's on the opposite side of the battlefield, casting spells your way. It's enough to give anyone whiplash. But there's hope. If you play your cards right and make the right dialogue choices, you can convince these former friends to rejoin your ranks. It's like a school reunion, except instead of awkward small talk, there's sword fighting. I remember standing in the rain-soaked battlefield, pleading with Sylvan to remember our good times and his undying love for flirting. Surprisingly, it worked. Now let's jump into a game where turning enemies into allies is literally a core mechanic. At number 7, Persona 5 lets you turn your enemies into powerful allies with a bit of sweet talking. You're in the middle of a heated battle, shadows closing in from all sides. You could just smack them around until they vanish. But where's the fun in that? Instead, you start negotiating. Yeah, you heard me right, negotiating with monsters. By using your charm and wits, you can convince these shadowy foes to join your cause. One moment, you're trading blows with a demon that looks like it crawled out of someone's worst nightmare. The next, you're offering it a deal it can't refuse. Hey, how about we stop fighting and you join my team, I say, wiping the sweat off my brow. The demon pauses, considers my offer, and then, bam, it's on my side. Nothing says let's be friends like beating them in battle and then asking nicely. It's like high school all over again, but with more fireballs and fewer cafeteria food fights. Sometimes they even ask you riddles or make weird demands before agreeing to join. I once had to compliment a shadow's horns? Yeah, strange but effective. From charming enemies to making moral decisions about your foes, let's step into the shadowy world of assassins.
You squeeze out every drop of wine you can, then you pass it. Put that on my tools.
Number 6 brings us Dishonored 2, where you decide whether your enemies stay enemies or become something more. I'm sneaking through the dark alleys of Karnaca, my heart pounding like a drum. I spot my target, a corrupt noble who's causing all sorts of trouble. My blade is ready, but I pause. Do I really need to end this guy, or is there another way? Turns out, in Dishonored 2, not stabbing someone might just make them like you more. You can either eliminate your targets, or find non-lethal ways to deal with them, sometimes leading to alliances with former foes. Imagine this. Instead of going full assassin mode, I use my wits and a sleep dart to knock out the noble. Next thing you know, he's waking up in a cozy prison cell, reconsidering his life choices. One of my favorite moments is dealing with Kirin Jindosh, the mad inventor. Instead of slicing him up, I disable his brain with an electroshock machine. It's like giving him a really intense therapy session, minus the couch. Later on, he's much less of a problem and even a bit grateful. Who knew turning enemies into frenemies could be so satisfying? It's hilarious how not killing someone can flip the script entirely. They go from cursing your name to being weirdly appreciative that you didn't skewer them like a kebab. Next, we're off to the world of dragons, where friendships are forged in battle.
She is our spy master.
Yes, tactfully put, Cassandra.
At number 5, Dragon Age Inquisition shows that even your enemies can become your greatest allies. I'm leading my ragtag group of heroes through the rugged terrain of Thedas, and I spot someone familiar, Cullen, a former Templar with a past that's as rocky as the path we're walking. At first, he's more likely to give me the cold shoulder than a helping hand. But after a few shared battles and heartfelt conversations about our mutual disdain for Darkspawn, he starts to come around. Whether it's political rivals or former enemies, you can build deep relationships based on the choices you make. Picture this. I'm in a heated debate with Morrigan, who initially seems more interested in her own mysterious agenda than helping out. But through a series of smart choices and showing her I can be trusted, she goes from a thorn in my side to an invaluable ally with her powerful magic. And who knew politics and dragons could lead to such unlikely friendships? One moment I'm squaring off against Iron Bull and his band of Kunari mercenaries. The next, we're downing drinks at the tavern, laughing about that time he almost cleaved me in two. Turns out, nothing says let's be friends like slaying a dragon together. From alliances to something more personal, let's talk about enemies with memories.
Up to the forge! You know what happens if the quartermaster's...
Number 4 is Shadow of Mordor, where the Nemesis system makes enemies that remember you, and sometimes become your allies. In this game, every orc you encounter has a memory. Trust me, these guys hold grudges. I remember one time I barely escaped from an orc captain, only to run into him later with a scar I gave him and a burning desire for revenge. His name was Goroth the Scarred. Creative, right? Goroth didn't just forget about our little scuffle. No, he remembered every swing of my sword and every insult I hurled his way. The next time we crossed paths, he was out for blood. But here's the twist. After defeating him yet again and sparing his life, something unexpected happened. He started respecting me. Yeah, who knew giving an orc a second chance could pay off? Soon enough, Goroth went from snarling enemy to unexpected ally. I was ambushed by a horde of orcs, outnumbered and cornered. Just when I thought it was game over, Goroth appeared out of nowhere and helped me turn the tide. Picture this. One moment he's trying to skewer me, the next he's bashing an orc skulls by my side. This Nemesis system isn't just about creating enemies, it's about building these crazy dynamic relationships that can flip on a dime. It's like having a frenemies list, but with more axes and less passive-aggressive texting. Now, let's head to feudal Japan, where the enemy of your enemy might just become your friend. At number 3, Ghost of Tsushima throws you into the moral dilemmas of samurai life, where friends and enemies are often the same. I remember riding through the lush fields of Tsushima, the wind rustling through my armor. I spot Ryuzo, an old friend from my past. He's now leading a group of bandits, causing havoc across the island. The samurai code dictates that I should take him down, but our history makes me hesitate. It's not just about swinging a sword, it's about the choices I make and the paths they lead to. There I was, face to face with Ryuzo. Instead of drawing my katana, I decided to talk. Ryuzo, we don't have to do this, I say, hoping my words cut deeper than any blade could. After a tense moment, he lowers his weapon. Turns out, a bit of empathy goes a long way in this war-torn land. Samurai code is tricky, but you'd be surprised how many enemies come around if you play your cards right, like that time with Masako. One moment she's accusing me of betrayal, the next, we're side by side, cutting down Mongol invaders like it's a synchronized dance routine. Of course, it's not always that simple. Some choices lead to betrayal and heartbreak. One wrong move and an old friend might turn on you faster than you can say honor. Next, let's move into the moral gray zone, where the difference between friend and foe is a matter of perspective.
Not in the city.
Including what happened to Conrad?
Exactly. We can make contact with the CIA, then we'll find Conrad.
Number 2 is Spec Ops, The Line, where enemies and friends are constantly shifting as the story progresses. I'm trudging through the desolate, sand-choked streets of Dubai, sweat dripping down my face. Every corner I turn, I find myself questioning who's really on my side. The game forces you to question your decisions. Who's a friend and who's an enemy? The lines blur as the story unfolds. I remember one mission vividly. My squad and I were ambushed, pinned down by snipers. We need to fall back! I shout, adrenaline pumping. But as we retreat, I spot civilians in the crossfire. Do I save them and risk my team, or leave them to their fate? The weight of every choice sits heavy on my shoulders. And then there's that gut-wrenching moment with the white phosphorus. It's supposed to be a tactical decision. Clear out the enemies. But when the smoke clears and you see the devastation, it's not just soldiers lying there, it's civilians too. My character's reflection in the shattered glass looks back at me, haunted and broken. In Spec Ops, sometimes the real enemy is yourself. Yeah, it's that deep. As I stand amidst the wreckage, one of my squad mates approaches, eyes wide with horror. What have we done? His voice cracks, and it echoes my own inner turmoil. And finally, the #1 game where your enemies might be your friends is... Taking the top spot is NieR Automata, where enemies and heroes are tangled in a web of complex relationships. In this game, every boss and enemy has a backstory that makes you rethink who's really in the wrong. Picture this. I'm in the middle of a high-stakes battle against Simone, an opera-singing machine who's more diva than destroyer. As I dodge her attacks and aim for her weak points, snippets of her past flash before my eyes. Turns out, she's not just a mindless robot. She's got a tragic love story that makes me hesitate before landing the final blow. Do we really have to kill her? I ask, my voice barely audible over the sound of clashing metal. My companion, 9S, looks at me with a mixture of confusion and pity. She's a machine. We don't have a choice. By the end, you'll be crying over the same enemies you fought hours ago. Thanks, NieR. Seriously, the emotional whiplash is real. One moment I'm hacking and slashing through waves of enemies. The next, I'm tearing up over their sob stories. It's like being in an action-packed soap opera with existential undertones. And there you have it, 12 games where your enemies aren't just people to defeat, but potential friends. From monsters you can charm to samurai moral dilemmas, these games show that sometimes your greatest enemy is your next best friend. Whether it's negotiating with a shadowy foe in Persona 5 or making tough choices in Spec Ops: The Line, these experiences remind us that every adversary has a story, and sometimes that story leads to unexpected friendships. Next time you're squaring off against a villain, maybe think twice. They might be your future ally. Who knows? The enemy you're about to take down could become your greatest asset with just the right choice or dialogue option. If you enjoyed this list, hit the like button, comment with your favorite game where enemies become friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more gaming twists. Your engagement helps us bring you more content that dives deep into the fascinating world of gaming narratives. Thanks for watching, and remember, keep your enemies close, but keep your gaming even closer.